I did entrepreneurial activities as a kid without even knowing it. Like whenever we were playing a game, I'd always want to make up my own rules, create a new version of Uno or a game outside with my friends. We had clubs in middle school, and like the club I joined was the baseball card club. So, went to different card shows and with my dad and bought baseball and Pokemon cards and sold them to my friends at school. And so, kind of was doing entrepreneurial things without really knowing they were entrepreneurship. Dropbox or DocSend did a study a few years ago that like most VCs spend 3.5 minutes reviewing a pitch deck before they decide whether or not they're going to have a conversation with the founder. And so that's a really short period of time. Yeah, you have to have it like basically perfect or near perfect. So, that was something I wanted to help tackle and solve for.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Through with a Splash of Tea, a podcast where conversation is key. I'm your host, Cass, and let's get right into it. So today, we have a very special guest. Today, we have Jason Kraus. Jason is a serial entrepreneur, investor, and community builder, helping startups venture forward. The title of his book and the mission behind his ventures. Jason is an active investor through Boston Harbor Angels and the EQx Fund, with the thesis that you should always bet on the jockey and the people behind the business. Jason, first things first, I want to say thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me and excited for our conversation.
I know, it's going to be so good. Okay. So first things first, I like to have the majority of my guests start at the very beginning because I do think that has a little bit to pour into who you are today. So share with us a little bit about where you came from and your background.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Sharon, Mass, so not too far from here. And
Shut up. I grew up in Sharon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What year did you graduate?
2010.
Oh my gosh. If I stayed at Sharon High, we would have went to school together. I graduated in 2012.
Oh, wow.
That's so interesting. Okay, go ahead. Ow, I didn't even know that. That's crazy. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I grew up in Sharon. Now I'm in the entrepreneurial and venture space, but I did entrepreneurial activities as a kid without even knowing it. Like whenever we were playing a game, I'd always want to make up my own rules, create a new version of Uno or a game outside with my friends. Joined, we had clubs in middle school, and like the club I joined was the baseball card club. So, went to different card shows and with my dad and bought baseball and Pokemon cards and sold them to my friends at school. And so, kind of was doing entrepreneurial things without really knowing they were entrepreneurship. Also really wanted to I enjoyed reading and writing and wanted to be an author someday too as a kid, and thought like that had to be your job and you're either an author or you did something else. And, later I learned out that you could do both. And so, after school, went to college in upstate New York, Colgate University, studied econ and math, and thought I was going more had some internships and thought I was going more traditional finance route. So investment management or investment banking or something like that. What got me, it was the beginning of senior year, was talking with my friends, it was super cold out in the winter there. And we were like, we wished we had some sort of way to know what was going on outside of just texting a bunch of people, what was going on around campus and if it was worth, going into town at night, or if, we should stay up and do something, at one of the apartments, or basically figure out, what was happening around school. And so, came up with this idea for an app called Night Owl. Didn't really know anything about starting a business, but we researched and found this platform, freelance.com, where, you could get somebody overseas to create an app really cheaply. And got kind of what I now know is a MVP, or minimal viable product built. And, now kind of know how you go and take that out to get feedback and use that for your next version. But for us, it was just a really good learning experience of like, we had this idea. We figured out, what it could look like. And there were some challenges, didn't do enough research that there were a bunch of other apps called Night Owl. And, had to change the name and figure that whole process out. But it got me into my next step after school went to a grad program at Babson, and really big on, was also like looking at different finance programs, but that overlapped with entrepreneurial. It was an entrepreneurial leadership program. So I was like impressed that this could be basically kind of a place to take some of the, finance and investment side I was interested in with the entrepreneurial side, and like, even just that process of trying to start something and build a business in the first place. And then, when I was at school at Babson, I also got an internship with the Boston Harbor Angels Group, which was really like the first experience seeing how investors think about going into startup companies. So it was about 50 members. They all had different backgrounds. Some were CFOs at different companies. Others were like physicians from the medical space. They'd worked at different corporate companies, and we're all bringing different backgrounds. And like every time a company pitched, somebody had experience from the group, and that could either validate and they really liked what the company was doing, or they would push back and say, hey, there's actually other businesses in this space, and ask more questions, and got a deeper understanding of like what investors even look at in the first place. And kind of my role there was like taking notes on the pros and cons of each of the companies, and what all the feedback from the investor group was, and putting that together in a report that got sent out to the rest of the group. And that was really like the entry point for me into the venture capital world and the angel group world, and kind of the spark for everything I've done since then.
So I want to ask you, what did you find that most top investors want to know or ask when it comes to investing into a smaller business or in any business?
Yeah. It's really, so I learned that, it's a lot. It's not just the investment today. It's really trying to predict, what's going to happen 5, 6, 7 years from now, and, what the market's going to look like, if this is still going to be a novel technology or not, or the reasons why, a big company can't do this and won't do this. And so like, there's always gaps. And that's, I think, why startups exist in the first place, is like, it's really hard for companies that have, hundreds or thousands of people to make drastic changes and, adapt to what customers really want as quickly as a startup can. So, pinpointing why this is a great startup business to do that the big players, kind of can't tackle the market, like why it's good now. And the big emphasis I learned was really on the team itself. So, sharing that a lot of the questions revolved around the expertise of the founders, the advisors and board members they surrounded themselves with, and basically kind of the premise that, if it was the investors coming up with the idea, they'd still want to hire this team to run the business.
That makes perfect sense. It's about longevity. And like, can this investor see you staying in the game for the long run? And what does that really look like? Like, what does your longevity look like 10, 15, 20, 30 years? Or are you just talking for 5 years, 3 to 5 down the line, and I just want to get out of the game, which, I mean, it just isn't a great investment if you ask me, but who's asking me? Anyways, let's discuss when you entered more into your professional career and what that looked like and how that started.
Sure. Yeah, it actually started with kind of a lot of LinkedIn messages for trying to connect with as many Colgate and Babson alums as I could, anybody in the venture space, first learning from them. So, getting a feel for like if this was even an industry I wanted to get into the first place. Getting trying a few different spaces from venture capital, private equity, like other groups and fields, and figuring out, kind of what it took to get in the door in the first place. Eventually, yeah, got connected through a Babson alum to a fund that was raising a new round, came in as an analyst and learned a lot. Like, yeah, basically, I was a venture capital analyst for a fund that was part of a family office group. And so my role was really like being the first one to review all the deals, pitch decks and deal submissions that came in, figure out.
Jason, I'm going to stop you right
Yeah.
there. Okay, so I'm going to assume that not all of you, which this is nothing bad. I'm going to assume that not all of you guys know like truly what venture capitalism is or like private funding might be. So before you continue, I'm going to have you explain venture capitalism and like what private funding, the realm of it, like you were talking to a 6-year-old.
All right. Sounds good. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. So, venture capital investment. So first off, there's angels and venture capitalists. Angels are investing their own money for a stake in a business, and venture capitals are like professional fund setup that manage other people's money. They might invest themselves into the fund, but there's a formal like fund, a certain amount they're going to invest across a certain portfolio of companies. And the typical deal with between venture capitalists and startups is there's a check that goes into the company. There's a certain valuation that the company is given, and it's negotiated between the investors and the venture capitalists. And, that gives them a certain percentage ownership in the business. And the way investors make a return on that is at an exit event. So that's like either your company gets acquired by a larger company and all the shares are bought out, and whoever owns a certain percentage gets money at that point, or there's an IPO and you go on the stock market and anybody can publicly trade shares at that point. There could be a like deal with another group that's, a private equity group or something that makes a deal per shares. But the whole model is there's a share price that's given, and the big difference between a publicly traded company and a private company is there's no, like, it's not a continuous pricing. So there's an investment round. You set the price on, what's negotiated and what's a fair value for your shares at that stage. And then there could be 12, 18, 24 months later, you do another round and negotiate with more investors and set a new price for your company and hope that it went up between the last round and this round. So yeah, it's a like long-term investment in terms of, it's going to be for the life of the business or until there's a new ownership structure of the business. But also looking at in the short term, like, does it make sense to go in today, or is it a better deal to wait a year or 2 years for more kind of de-risking of the business? And that's how, venture capitalists think about it. And usually it's not always like, yes or no, is this a good investment? It's compared to anything else. If we have a fund set up that has capital to go into 20 or 50 companies, whittling down all the deals to who you think are going to be the most successful ventures of those. Yeah, because you can't go into every single business. It's figuring out like, which ones you want to make up a portfolio with, and have some that might be higher risk, higher potential return, and some that are a little bit safer. They're likely to grow, but probably not as, don't have as high potential as the others, but more likely to be a successful venture. So figuring out that whole balancing act in a portfolio.
Okay, so Well, I'm going to hold off on asking that question. I'll ask it later.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to bring you back to you working with VC companies and private equity companies. And yeah, I'm going to go back there.
Yeah. So, basically was reviewing a lot of deals, figuring out who got a meeting with the investment committees. And again, there could be in any VC fund, there could be like 1,000 to 5,000 deals coming in the door. Anything from like people just submitting pitch decks, business plans, reaching out by email, reaching out on the forums on the site, or getting sent deals from accelerator programs and other groups that are working with startups. So not everybody can get a meeting, and that was kind of that like first point that led to my current business, Prepare for VC, was starting to think like, hey, there's all these great entrepreneurs, wish we had the opportunity to support everyone and like even, be able to meet with everybody. But thinking through, between this firm and other angel groups and venture funds, I was starting to see and interact with like how we could help startups even get in the door in the first place. And the fact that you really have, like there were Dropbox or DocSend did a study a few years ago that like most VCs spend 3.5 minutes reviewing a pitch deck before they decide whether or not they're going to have a conversation with the founder. And so, that's a really short period of time. Yeah, you have to have it like basically perfect or near perfect. So, that was something I wanted to help tackle and solve for.
So how did you go about doing that, or start to believe, or start to head towards tackling that? Like, hey, that's not a lot of time. And you further understood working with the angels, you further understood it from the other side, from the investor perspective. So how were you able to mold these business owners into being the businesses that an investor would want to invest in?
Yeah. So started with basically it just created like, a quick website on Wix or something. And, called it Prepare for VC because I wanted to help startups prepare for the venture capital market. So originally, put a quick page, like some services I thought we'd end up, or basically I would end up doing. Also use some freelance platforms like Upwork to try to get some initial projects. And the whole starting point was like first helping founders with the pitch itself, helping like, especially really technical founders, like be able to pitch something that can be easily understood by any audience, investors that aren't technical in that field, but might want to invest in their business, or even just, their customers they're talking to that don't always need to know like how everything is built. They just need to know what it's going to do for them and how it's going to help their business. So started with the pitch decks, also helping founders like figure out what their financial modeling is. And really one of our current COO, Steve, always jokes that it started as Jason as a service in the early days. So it was me, going out, helping founders and trying to figure out like how we could make their pitches even stronger and help them understand what investors look for and like what's going to separate a company that gets a meeting or gets a deal from companies that don't.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. That's such a good skill to have, or like a good, I don't know, good service to outsource, to be able to, okay, because a business, in order to grow, you will always need some sort of monetary investment, whether it's coming from you or coming externally. And most likely you want it to come externally. You don't want it to come from your bank. So that's great, Jason. Oh my gosh. It's like hitting me. All right. We're going to dive a little bit more into Prepare for VC, but I also want to talk about your author hat for a little bit.
Sure.
Okay, Jason's an author, you guys. Well, obviously I said that in the beginning. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about you entering the writing world and starting your book and writing your book and all things book. Let's talk.
Yeah. It was actually a conference I went to that it was called the Next Gen Summit in New York. And it was for like young entrepreneurs to learn different skills, learn from all the speakers there. And one of the speakers was this Georgetown professor that created this program called the Creator Institute. And like he basically, the whole model or his talk was about how anybody can get started now. And, having, whether it's a book or a podcast or any other forum where you become a creator is a great way to meet the people that you want to meet. And so that could be for some people that was like applying for jobs or adding something to your resume. Others, it was getting clients as a service provider or consultant. Others, it was just becoming more of a expert in their field or industry. And I thought it was, really kind of inspiring talk for me, and ended up talking with him further. And said there's a cohort, basically there was a cohort model where there were like six authors they were working with at the same time that went through this basically course on how to become an author, and paired you up with different editors. And so I went through it, and like I knew I wanted to write something about startups, but didn't know exactly where it would head at the beginning. But they kind of walked me through the whole interview process, like how to ask the right questions when you're, talking to people you want to interview for your book, and how to lay everything, write the manuscript first and then reorganize into chapters, and create the right formatting and features for everything. Went through that program. It was about 9 months writing the whole book, what became Venture Forward Lessons from Leaders. And, my goal for it was helping founders realize like there's not necessarily a prescription to creating a perfect venture, but you can learn from anybody that's been there and done that before. So, learn what works, what doesn't work, apply the lessons to your own venture. And so each chapter was a different phase of the startup journey, from even coming up with your idea in the first place to going to market and talking to customers. We talked about pivots and like, pivots and fundraising and the whole startup journey. And each chapter also talked about some well-known ventures and how they got started, and how a lot of the businesses we think of as overnight successes really were like 10, up to 10 years in the making before they became overnight successes, and some of the, challenges and success stories that came out of that. And then, interviews with founders I met and spoke with specifically for the book, as well as others I had worked with through Prepare for VC and some of the investment groups I've been a part of. I really, every chapter is designed to kind of different perspectives and different ways of building your venture that the readers can kind of figure out what makes the most sense for them and what they resonate the most with. And also share some of the untold stories where a lot of times you just hear like, about the $1 billion unicorn ventures, but don't hear as much about like how somebody built a really successful startup with, smaller amounts of capital that, they were able to grow and scale and serve all their customers and solve everybody's problems with, that might not make the national headlines, but, it's still a really powerful story and successful business.
There's so much value in those smaller stories too. Like there's so much grit in those stories as well. And we always think about, well, just because it's more well known, we think about the big, like the Steve Jobs and those big names. But it's like there's like, even if you look locally, like people look locally at like like entrepreneurial growth stories, or just like even like sports success stories in your local area or towns around you, you'll be amazed as to how many successful people came from your own area, and you can do it too. Yes, I love that. That's so after Sharon, I moved to Brockton, and Brockton like had so many like Rocky Marciano is one of our biggest success stories. He was a boxer. But there's so much pride in that. And then like it forces you to look at like, oh, what else do we have? And such a rich history. Anyways,
I love that.
no, it's right. It's so important. What was the most difficult part about writing your book?
Trying to schedule the time in while I was, running Prepare for VC and getting involved, also do a lot of startup community events. So basically carving out the time to actually sit down and write. And, I really liked the whole process, especially interviewing and talking to people and, figuring out what I wanted to say and what I wanted people to get out of it. But yeah, I think, it helped having that group where like I knew we had a check-in on Friday and, we're going to be sharing updates and have kind of like smaller deadlines I can move towards and create some deadlines of my own that, I wanted to get done and keep everything on track.
Mm-hmm. Have you always been able to balance multiple plates or wear many hats, or you grew into that?
Yeah. I think I must like doing that because I've always, I like to get involved in multiple things and kind of have a day, a typical day that's not really a typical day. It's like, I'm talking with, I have, some founder calls, some partner calls, doing some, building on things on my own or, like looking through the investment portfolios. And so, different things I'm always involved in at the same time. And for me, I like, just being able to really devote like a few hours to something and then switch to something completely different and, kind of go from one thing to the next. But sometimes that can be challenging too. And, setting those deadlines or having those deadlines helps because I also work better under pressure when I know something is coming up and is due. And I have to get something done in a certain period of time.
I love that. Now we're going to dive into Prepare for VC. So I wanted to take a look at what you guys are currently working on. Also, some of your like greatest success stories, some companies that you were able to match up really well with investors, as well as where you see yourself going in the future. So let's start with all that, everything.
Sounds good. So kind of the turning point from Jason as a service to what we are now as Prepare for VC was around 2020. Like we were kind of contemplating some and I had brought on some consultants like on a project basis to help me with everything from pitch decks to financials. And a few of them, one that's kind of started there, Chris, we were talking about like developing a curriculum where we could work with multiple startups at once and do more of a course. And that eventually became like what started out as our Prepare for VC Accelerator program. And now we call it our Breakthrough program. The whole goal was like being able to support, a group of founders where they can learn from our team and all of the experts we could bring in and also learn from each other because they're in a peer group and you could see what's working for one founder that could also help another. And so started thinking about it as a virtual program, and then 2020 was a perfect time to launch a virtual program. And a lot of founders were looking because they didn't have as many resources now that we're all, because everything, was designed to be in person. So, we launched that program, and now we've had, we're in our 9th cohort of the program since then. So, basically built out our core team with Chris and Steve, who I mentioned earlier, a pretty wide advisor and mentor network we built up where people, we have branding and marketing and legal experts that all come in and partner with us and lead different sessions throughout the program. Built up an investor network that comes out to our final pitch events at the end, and also to give advice and feedback to founders throughout the program. Now really what we've developed is what started out, and it's still called Prepare for VC. So what started out as helping founders get funding, it's a part of our programming curriculum now, but it's also really about growing and learning as a founder. And so we put a lot of emphasis on leadership development skills, also planning for what happens post funding, and when you're going out and hiring a team or connecting with people and building out partnerships, and how you can kind of learn a little bit about each of those topics all in one place. And kind of our model is really getting rid of the unknowns. So there's some things, and a lot of things you're going to be able to plug in and implement during the program and during the curriculum. But there's other things where you realize hey, it wasn't even on your roadmap before. It might take 3 months or 6 months to get there, but now at least what you need to figure out down the road, and aren't blindsided by kind of new tasks and responsibilities as they come up. So we developed, that's really our core program is the breakthrough program. We still do one-on-one coaching and strategy sessions for founders, especially, and projects, especially around the fundraising side. And then what we developed last year was this tool called Chart My Course, where we do an initial assessment with the founder and then plan out our assessment of their next 90-day roadmap and what they should be focused on, what resources we can help out with, and what else they can turn to in the community, for additional support.
Wow. So where do you want Prepare for VC to go in the future?
Yeah, I think we're putting a lot of work on this Chart My Course tool now, because we want to be able to help more and more founders wherever they are, figure out, what their next steps are and what resources, whether it's our programs or somebody else's in the community. And we built great relationships with a lot of the other incubators, accelerators, startup support programs. So, basically, would love to see Chart My Course become kind of that first step for founders, where you get your assessment, you figure out what your roadblocks and challenges are, and then you keep coming back and using it and tapping into resources in our network and others to get the additional support you need. And then we also use that to say, hey, out of all the founders, you're going to be a perfect fit right now for our next cohort, or you're going to need to work on these few things before then, and then we can really help you even further. It's a tool. It's a tool on its own. Transitioning it from more kind of piecing different tools and technologies together to building something on our own. But definitely that area. And then our breakthrough program, I think, this current cohort we have has been really exciting to see. It's probably one of the most interactive groups we've had, where everybody is connecting with each other outside of the sessions and, offering different advice to each other as founders in the programs. And that's really something we want to keep seeing going forward, is they're learning from us, they're learning from mentors, but the more they can help each other out too is great to see.
Do you see yourself being able to take advantage of AI in the future, or not really because it's more hands-on and you want it to be more interpersonal?
Yeah. So right now we're using it to help, like kind of internal GPT, to help with assessments and, even like putting everything into standard frameworks where if people are submitting pitch decks, business plans in different formats, you can kind of compare easily using using AI and have everything in one like kind of document. You can analyze and see who needs more support in one area or another. So that's kind of, we're using it to spot like kind of intervention points where we personally go in and help support with different tasks. But I could definitely see other, chatbots or tools kind of being built in that might help the founders reflect more and, get more resources done or get more resources like kind of from our methodology. And then we still have our own, the human touch and programs and like one-on-one calls and conversations to support beyond that.
I love that. All right, Jason, let people know how they can contact you for either prepare for VC or just to ask questions.
Sure. I really appreciated this conversation. And would love to chat with anybody that took the time to listen. I have a personal site that's jasonkraus.me, and then prepareforvc.com with the number 4 is our website. Happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. And really appreciate everybody taking the time and listening to our conversation today.
Of course. So you guys contact him if you are a small business owner or if you have any business and you need some funding. Every business needs funding. So contact Jason and he can help you. Okay, so I have a closing question that I ask all of my guests. Sure. So I'm going to ask you. So I created this platform so people could learn because I'm really big into knowledge. So I want to know from you, what is one thing that you wish more people knew? And it could have to do with prepare for VC. It could have to do with venture capitalism. It could have to do with the world, anything. It doesn't matter. What's one thing that you wish more people knew?
Yeah, I would say the fact that, you really have to get out there earlier on and talk to, start having these conversations and talking to people. Because a lot of times, we've seen founders like being heads down and building something that, when they finally go talk to customers, it doesn't even make sense for the way they'd use it and interact with it. So the ones that, it doesn't have to be perfect when you're talking to people, and, your customers don't want to steal your idea and make it their own. They want to continue building their business. Same with, and, there's obviously there's bad actors in any space, but most investors want to stick to investing and go into multiple startups. They also don't want to like take your idea and go build another venture out of it, so kind of being open to like building those relationships early on. And the more you can have that discussion and set the starting point and say, hey, this is where I was when we talked first, took your advice. Now we're here, like, as an investor or as a customer, hey, we showed you an early version, took all the feedback, and this is our new version. Are you ready to come on board? Like, the more you can build those relationships early and just get out there before things are perfect, the more it'll help you in the long run.
That's such good advice. That's so good. That was a good answer. That's true. All right, Jason, thank you so much for coming today and talking to us.
Thank you for having me and appreciate all the great questions.
Of course. You want to come back? It's a rhetorical question. Good, because it's a rhetorical question. You have to.
Sounds
you don't get a choice.
All right.
Thank you for watching if you watched. Thank you for listening if you listened. You can catch Through with a Splash of Tea every Wednesday and Thursday on all streaming platforms, including YouTube. Bye now.